I want you to picture a very specific moment. It's let's say it's a Tuesday night.
Okay.
You're driving home, and you have the exact job title you wanted, maybe 5 years ago. You have the car you wanted.
Right.
Maybe you just closed on the house. By every single metric your parents or your school or, your LinkedIn feed gave you, you have completely won the game.
The checklist is totally complete. You checked every box.
Exactly, every single box. But then you pull into your driveway, you turn off the engine, and you don't feel triumphant. You don't feel full.
Yeah, you feel empty.
You feel this really hollow, aching exhaustion. And it's not just I had a long day at work, kind of tired. It's so much deeper. It's this profound sense of, is this it? Is this the prize I was running toward?
That is exactly the Fisher King moment.
And
it's a genuinely terrifying place to be.
It is.
Because you look around and you think to yourself, I have absolutely everything I'm supposed to have, so why do I feel like I'm slowly dying inside?
And that feeling, that exact contradiction, is what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We have a fascinating, incredibly dense, and frankly kind of haunting document in front of us today.
It's intense.
It's simply titled 8, The Fisher King Wound.
It's a heavy one today, for sure.
It really is. I mean, to set the expectations, this isn't your standard 5 quick tips to be happier at work article.
Oh, not at all.
No. This is a profound deep dive into psychology, mythology, and what the text actually calls alchemy. We're going to talk about why so many incredibly successful people feel completely dead inside.
Yeah.
And we're going to use the medieval legend of Sir Percival and the Wounded King as a map to figure out why that happens.
And the central premise of this source material is just fantastic. It's this idea that the toughness we build up just to survive the modern world.
The armor.
Exactly, the armor we put on.
Yeah.
That armor is actually the very thing that is slowly killing us.
There's a quote right at the top of the source material that really sets the tone. It's from Rumi. It says, "The wound is the place where the light enters you."
Which, that sounds beautiful on a coffee mug or an Instagram post.
Right, very aesthetic.
But when you are actually living it, it is agonizing. It literally means you have to break open in order to be fixed.
Yeah. And the text makes a really clear distinction right away. We aren't just talking about trauma in the casual way people use the word online now. We are talking about a very specific type of wounding that happens to what it calls the source of life.
The generative power.
Exactly. So before we get to the knights and the castles and the myths, we really need to lay the groundwork. The source material presents this incredibly intricate timeline of human consciousness.
The 4 stages.
Right. It calls it the 4 stages of awareness. And looking at the diagrams included in the text, well, it honestly looks a bit like a tragedy playing out in 4 acts.
Because it is a tragedy. It's essentially the psychological story of how we systematically lose our souls as we grow up.
So let's walk through this. Walk us through stage 1. The text calls this the infant, or pre-verbal awareness.
Right. So visually, the text represents this first stage as a very simple, perfectly closed circle. Whole. Complete.
No jagged lines at all.
None. 0. When you are an infant, you exist in a state of what psychologists sometimes call oceanic oneness.
Oceanic oneness. I like that.
It's very descriptive because if you are a baby and you look at your mother, you do not see another person.
You see you.
You see an absolute extension of yourself. If you are hungry, the entire universe is hunger. If you are warm, the world is warmth. There's no concept of a subject versus an object.
So there's no inner conflict yet.
There's no conflict because there is no you to be in conflict with. You are just everything. It's a state of completely unconscious wholeness. It's effectively paradise.
But paradise doesn't last. We grow up and we hit stage 2, which the text labels conditional awareness or the child.
And the visual image here in the text changes in a really interesting way. We see a drawing of a young child sitting by a pool of water, looking down at their reflection.
The puddle stage.
Exactly, the puddle stage. This represents the birth of the ego. The child looks into the water and suddenly realizes, oh, that's me. I am separate from that tree over there. I am separate from mommy.
But the text describes this specific stage as being very curious and fluid. It doesn't frame it as negative yet.
No, it's not negative at all. It's highly playful. I mean, think about any 3-year-old you know. They could be a fierce dragon one minute, a princess the next, and a brave firefighter the minute after that.
Yeah, my nephew does exactly that.
Right. They're just trying on different identities like they're trying on hats. And if they get angry, they just scream. If they're sad, they bawl their eyes out.
And then 5 minutes later, they're perfectly fine, laughing at a bug.
Precisely. because they haven't learned to judge their own feelings yet. The reflection they see in the puddle isn't distorted by society. They see themselves very clearly. I am sad right now.
Okay. That is simply reality. There's no shame attached to the sadness whatsoever.
And this is where the horror movie music starts playing in the background, because then we move to stage 3.
Brutalized awareness. The adolescent.
The text actually calls this transition the shift. And the imagery provided, it's so vivid. We have a young figure,
Right.
but they're standing up now, and they are completely encased in heavy plate armor.
Right.
And they are standing squarely between 2 giant shattered mirrors.
Broken mirrors. That feels highly significant compared to the clear puddle.
It represents a deeply fractured self-image. This is exactly the age where the world really gets its hooks into you.
The text uses a phrase here that really stuck with me. It calls it the mechanism of rejection.
Yeah. This is the crucial age where we are taught that being whole is actually dangerous.
How so? Walk us through that mechanism.
Well, imagine that 3-year-old from the puddle stage we just talked about.
Yeah.
They cry instantly when they're sad. Now, I want you to imagine a 13-year-old boy crying openly in the middle of a crowded middle school cafeteria.
Oh, wow. That's just social suicide.
Total social suicide. Society, meaning teachers, parents, peers, movies, culture at large, hands us a very specific script. And that script says, to survive in this environment, you must be strong, you must be rational, you must constantly be winning.
So the adolescent looks inward at all the parts of themselves that don't quite fit that rigid script.
Right. The sensitivity, the fear, the sudden need for a hug, all the soft parts.
And they reject them.
They don't just reject them. The text specifically says they brutalize them.
Brutalize.
They violently shove them into the shadow. They build thick iron armor over those soft spots so nobody can ever stab them there again.
So the armor isn't actually protection from the outside world. It's more like a cage for the inside.
It's absolutely both. It definitely keeps the world out, but it keeps the true, authentic self locked completely in. The text actually refers to a person in this state as a half-being.
Half-being. That is so harsh. I mean, we all have to wear a suit sometimes, right? We all have to be professional at work. Are they saying that just having a work persona means you're inherently damaged?
No, it's not about merely having the persona. It's about fundamentally believing that the persona is you. That is the critical distinction the text is making.
Oh, I see.
It is perfectly fine to wear armor when you ride into actual battle. The problem is when you come home, sit down at your own dinner table, and you are still wearing 50 pounds of steel plates.
You can't feel anything.
You can't feel the warmth of the food. You can't really hug your partner. You can't connect with your kids. You become the mask.
And the text says that at this stage, genuine connection is essentially replaced by control.
Exactly. The subconscious thought process is, I don't want to feel you, because feeling things is messy and unpredictable and I might get hurt. So instead, I just want to manage you.
And the crazy part is our culture views this exact behavior as maturity. We look at that person and say, oh, look at him, he's so professional, he's so steady, he never lets his emotions get the best of him.
We constantly mistake emotional numbness for actual strength. And that exact mistake leads us directly to the final destination. The tragedy is now complete. Stage 4.
The wounded king.
Yes. The visual image here is the king sitting on his throne. He has the heavy crown, he holds the scepter, but he is entirely surrounded by a dead wasteland.
This is the definitive Fisher King. He is simply the adolescent who managed to win the game. He kept that heavy armor on for 30 years. He aggressively climbed the corporate ladder.
Right?
He became the CEO, the senior partner, the respected patriarch of the family. But the ultimate price he paid for all that status was his own capacity to feel.
The text describes his internal state as emotional desolation.
He is incredibly powerful, but he is completely dead inside. And this perfectly brings us to the myth itself, because the Fisher King isn't just a clinical psychological label.
Great, it's a story.
It's one of the oldest, most potent, resonant stories in the entire Western canon.
And this is where the source material gets incredibly interesting to me, because it explicitly links this modern psychological state to a very specific physical wound described in the legend. Yes. So in the old Arthurian legends, the Fisher King is the guardian, the keeper of the Holy Grail. But he can't actually use it. He is suffering terribly from a magical wound that simply will not heal.
And where exactly is this wound?
The text is very blunt about this. It's in the groin.
The genitals.
Okay, so we really have to stop and look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Why the groin? I mean, obviously it's an uncomfortable thing to talk about, but mythologically speaking, why there? Why not a broken arm or a pierced heart?
You have to think about what the groin fundamentally represents in myth. It is not just about sex. It is the core generative power.
The ability to create.
Exactly. It is the ability to create life, to birth something entirely new into the world. By intentionally wounding the king in the groin, the myth is telling us this man can no longer create. He can only maintain what already exists.
He's sterile.
He is creatively sterile. He is emotionally sterile. He can sit on the throne and rule the kingdom. He can sign the laws. He can accumulate wealth. But he cannot bring any fresh, new life into his world. He has absolutely no joy. And the text describes his everyday environment in a way that I think a terrifying number of people listening will instantly recognize. It says he lives in a massive castle where there is a continuous, never-ending party going on.
That is the great irony of the Fisher King. He is incredibly wealthy. His royal court is constantly full of rich food, flowing wine, beautiful music, dancing. Everyone around him is having an absolute blast.
But him.
He is sitting right in the very center of it all, usually on a litter or a soft couch, because the text notes he's in far too much physical pain to even stand up straight, and he is in excruciating agony.
It's the ultimate visual metaphor for depression and success.
It really is. You're at the high-end charity gala. You're wearing the perfect tuxedo. Hundreds of people are clapping for you,
Right.
And inside you are silently screaming.
And the absolute worst part of it, you can't tell a single soul.
Why not?
Because you're the king.
Yeah.
The king bleeds, the kingdom falls. At least that's what he deeply believes. So he actively hides the wound. He forces a smile through the agony. He completely dissociates.
He has to. It's his duty.
And this brings us to the other main character, our hero. Or, well, let's just call him our protagonist for now. Percival.
Right, young Sir Percival.
Yeah.
The text introduces him basically as the perfect archetype of the brutalized adolescent we discussed in Stage 3.
He's the young, ambitious hotshot.
Exactly. So picture Percival. He's maybe 17, 18 years old. He's left his mother behind, which the text points out creates a massive amount of subconscious guilt, by the way.
No, definitely.
And he's just been aggressively riding around the country winning every single tournament. He feels totally on top of the world. He's put on the shiny armor, and he's been expertly trained by society to be a highly effective killer.
Right.
And one night, wandering through the woods, he stumbles upon this deeply mysterious castle. It doesn't seem to be on any of his maps.
The Fisher King's castle.
Exactly. And when he goes inside, it is not at all what a young warrior expects. It's not a gritty war room. It's a lavish feast. It's incredibly luscious. There's shining gold everywhere, massive candelabras, beautiful music playing. But right in the dead center of the great room, on a couch, not a throne, a couch, because of the pain, lies this wounded king.
And this is the guy with the severe groin wound.
Yes. And the text really emphasizes the intense psychological tension in this exact moment. The king is actively bleeding. It's visible, red blood. And Percival clearly sees it. He sees the intense pain the older man is in.
And this feels like the crucial part of the whole myth. Percival has been extensively trained in the School of Cool.
He's been taught to be extremely polite.
Even worse than that, he's been taught that a true professional knight simply does not ask prying, uncomfortable questions. A knight completely ignores the messy emotional stuff.
Exactly.
So he just shuts his mouth. He politely eats the fancy dinner, he watches the magical grail float by, and he says absolutely nothing about the bleeding man right in front of him.
Okay, we actually need to pause on the grail for a second here.
Good idea.
Because the text defines the grail as a magic cup that heals, sure. But it also explicitly links it to something called the Sephiroth of Cheesed.
Yeah, that part sounded incredibly technical when I read it.
It definitely gets esoteric there. But if we strip away the fancy Kabbalah terminology for a second, it makes perfect sense. Cheesed basically translates to unbounded loving kindness.
Okay, loving kindness.
Think of the king as representing structure and law. That is the core masculine energy in this specific mythological framework. It's rigid. It's the hard stone castle walls.
Right.
The grail, on the other hand, represents cheesed. Its flow, its mercy, its reception is the life-giving water inside the cup. The text is fundamentally arguing that if you have 100% structure the king and 0% mercy the grail, you don't actually get order.
You get a wasteland.
You get a totally dry, cracked, barren earth where absolutely nothing can grow.
So the king is slowly dying because he has way too much heavy armor and absolutely no access to the Grail's mercy. Percival just needs to step up and connect that rigid power to a much higher, softer purpose.
Correct. He needs to connect the power back to the heart. He is required to ask a very specific question. Whom does the Grail serve?
That he doesn't do it.
He completely fails. He gets drunk on the wine. He gets way too involved in the flashy party. He just gets distracted by all the noise and the shallow celebration.
He forgets to ask the one question that matters.
Yeah.
And the consequence of that silence is just brutal. He wakes up the very next morning and he is completely alone.
The entire castle is gone.
Gone. The golden opportunity for massive healing is completely lost. He is just dumped right back into the barren wasteland.
And he didn't ask the question simply because he was desperately trying to be appropriate. He actively chose societal etiquette over genuine human connection.
That is genuinely terrifying because when you think about it, how many times have we all done exactly that?
Probably every single day.
You see someone visibly hurting, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's a close friend, or honestly, maybe it's yourself in the mirror, and you think for a split second, I should say something deep here. I should really ask what's fundamentally wrong.
Right. But then your conditioning kicks in and you think, nah, that's way too awkward. I'll just make a quick joke. I'll just check my phone and ignore it.
We consistently choose the easy comfort of the distraction over the immense risk of true connection. That is exactly the Fisher King wound playing out in real-time action.
We're so busy winning or partying that we completely miss the profound suffering right in front of our faces, even if that suffering is our own.
Exactly.
So Percival fails the test. The king remains painfully wounded. The surrounding land remains a dead wasteland. But why? Why is this specific wound so incredibly hard to heal? Let's move into segment 3, decoding the wound.
The source text makes a very, very strong claim here. It says the Fisher King wound is not just an isolated injury, it is a fundamental psychological pattern.
And it links it directly, almost aggressively, to societal demands for toughness.
It calls it habitual brutalization.
That is such a strong, visceral phrase, habitual brutalization. What does that actually look like in our day-to-day lives? Well, it looks like the high school football coach telling a young player to just walk it off when they clearly have a concussion. It looks like the father subtly mocking his son for wanting to write poetry instead of playing sports.
Right.
But even deeper than that, it is the overarching cultural celebration of what the text calls dispassionate cruelty.
Dispassionate cruelty.
We deeply admire people who can make incredibly hard decisions without even blinking an eye. Think about the corporate CEO who fires 5,000 people right before Christmas just to artificially save the quarterly stock price.
We literally put him on the cover of business magazines.
Exactly. We praise him. We say, wow, what an incredibly strong leader. He didn't let his messy emotions get in the way of the bottom line.
And actively reward the psychopath.
We reward the armor. But the text tries to remind us. The actual human man trapped inside that thick armor is the Fisher King. He is secretly bleeding from the very source of his life. He has all the money in the world, but he has zero creativity, zero genuine love, zero true joy.
There's also a really fascinating note about the mother dynamic in the text here. It explicitly mentions that when this brutalization is actively supported by the mother figure, it creates a massive, lifelong dependence on poor quality conditional love.
This point is absolutely crucial. If the primary source of early comfort, usually the mother, also enforces this societal brutalization.
If she basically says, I only truly love you when you are acting like a strong winner.
Right. Then the young child learns very early on that love is purely conditional. Love becomes something you have to constantly earn by systematically destroying the softest parts of yourself.
You become entirely bound by a rigid sense of duty. You have a strict code, but you completely lose the ability to feel.
And that profound numbness leads directly to the symptom you teased in the intro, the one that blew my mind. The resentment of the innocent.
Yes. Let's really dig into this one. Why on earth do we get so genuinely mad at innocence?
It is a very strange, seemingly irrational emotional reaction.
Yeah.
But have you ever been in a tense corporate meeting or even a stressful family holiday gathering and someone, usually someone much younger or a new hire, asks a question that is just completely pure?
Like maybe they're just a little naive. Or maybe they are just really genuinely excited about a very simple idea.
Right, like someone saying, hey guys, why don't we just try being super nice to the angry client?
And instead of thinking, well, that's sweet but misguided, you feel this sudden, completely disproportionate hot flash of sheer rage.
Yes. You instantly think, shut up, you absolute idiot. You have no idea how the real world actually works.
Wipe that stupid happy smile off your face.
Exactly. Toughen up.
Oh.
But why do we actually feel that intense anger? Why does someone else's harmless innocence make us so deeply furious?
I honestly always assumed it was just because they were being legitimately annoying and slowing down the meeting.
No, the text argues something much deeper. It says it's because that pure person is forcefully reminding you of what you yourself had to kill.
Oof, that hits hard.
You look at that completely open, vulnerable, genuinely happy person, and your deepest subconscious instantly remembers the puddle stage.
Wow.
You remember vividly when you're exactly like that. And you simultaneously remember that in order to survive, in order to become the powerful king in the boardroom, you had to take that soft part of yourself out back and mercilessly shoot it.
So it's not actually anger, it's grief.
It is profound grief masquerading as defensive anger. You deeply envy them. You hate them in that moment because they still possess the exact beautiful thing that you lost forever.
That explains so incredibly much about highly toxic workplace cultures, the endless hazing, the whole concept of paying your dues. It's basically just systemic trauma dumping on the next generation.
It's the classic crab bucket mentality. I am completely miserable inside my heavy armor, so you must be forced to put on your heavy armor too. You are simply not allowed to be free and happy if I am not free.
It's the endless perpetuation of the wound. So, if we step back, we currently have an entire society run by bleeding fisher kings. We have a whole generation of younger Percivals riding around in emotional tanks, completely afraid to ask any real questions. Is there any actual hope here? Or are we all just doomed to sit and bleed in our fancy castles forever?
The text is fundamentally alchemical in nature, which means it is entirely about the process of deep transformation. There is absolutely hope, but it requires a very difficult second chance.
In the Arthurian myth, Percival actually gets a second shot at the castle, right?
He does, years later. And the text suggests this second chance usually manifests in modern life during a classic midlife crisis.
Ah, the sudden urge to buy a red sports car.
Well, see, that's actually the failed version of the midlife crisis. That is just the wounded Fisher King frantically trying to buy a shiny new toy to numb the agonizing pain. The real productive crisis occurs when the armor finally gets way too heavy to even move.
You just collapse under the weight of it.
You completely collapse. You finally realize on a soul level, I literally cannot do this anymore.
You realize you are actively becoming the Fisher King.
Exactly. The image of the Fisher King is actually a dire forewarning for young Percival. The Bleeding King is exactly what Percival will inevitably become if he doesn't fundamentally change his path. A heartless, wealthy warrior in constant pain.
So how does he actually change? The text uses a very specific phrase here that I absolutely love. It calls the process learning to shudder.
Learning to shudder.
That sounds incredibly visceral and, honestly, a little deeply unpleasant.
It is highly unpleasant. Think about it physically. Think about when a completely frozen limb starts to finally thaw out by a fire. It hurts a lot, right? It tingles sharply, it burns, it literally shakes.
Yeah, it's a terrible feeling.
When you have been emotionally frozen solid for 20 or 30 years, thawing out is not going to be a pleasant spa day. Learning to shudder means you finally force yourself to look at the sheer brutality of your own life.
You look at the things you did to get ahead.
The things you did, the people you ignored, the soft parts of your own soul you murdered, and you actually allow yourself to feel the full, crushing horror of it.
You finally stop rationalizing it all. You stop saying, well, I just did what I had to do to provide, and you start actually feeling the massive internal costs.
You let the horror fully in, and the text explicitly says this specific moment of shuddering is the first sign of true male maturity.
That completely flips our cultural narrative. Maturity isn't about being stoic and unbothered. True maturity is shaking with grief.
Maturity is feeling the full, unfiltered reality of the situation. Because once you actually shudder, once you genuinely feel the depth of the wound, you completely stop wanting to inflict it on anyone else.
Yeah.
The text beautifully says the individual gentles.
The gentle. I really like that used as an active verb.
You completely lose your aggressive taste for cruelty. You don't fiercely want to win every single argument anymore. You actively want to heal. You begin to strive for peace.
You strive for harmony.
You finally stop fighting the external world and start trying to internally heal it.
And that means you're finally ready to ask the crucial question.
Whom does the Grail serve?
But the king can't just ask the question himself, can he?
No, he can't. The king figure is far too far gone, too deeply consumed by his riches and his agonizing pain to do the work. He desperately needs the younger, more curious, seeking part of the self, the Percival archetype, to ask it for him.
That is such a beautiful, profound metaphor for deep internal shadow work. The part of you that is the boss, the success, the king, is completely trapped on the throne. You have to somehow access that much younger, innocent, seeking part of yourself just to break the dark spell.
You have to willingly become the vulnerable seeker all over again. You have to stop aggressively being the king and start gently being the fisher.
Now, the source material doesn't just leave us hanging with high-level poetic metaphors. It actually prescribes a very specific practical meditation practice to help heal this exact wound. It calls it the Who Am I meditation.
Right. This is a very classic technique. You often find variations of it in Buddhism and deep introspection traditions like Advaita Vedanta. But the source text applies it very specifically here to actively break apart the ego's armor.
Walk us through how to actually do it, because it sounds incredibly simple on the surface, but the text explicitly warns that it's a very tricky trap.
The basic instruction is deceptively simple. You sit quietly in meditation, and you repeatedly ask yourself the core question, who am I?
Just who am I? Okay.
Now, immediately, your hyperactive brain is going to jump in and answer.
It's going to say, I'm a podcast host, I'm a devoted father, I'm an American.
Exactly. Name, current job, social status, family role. The text says all of these immediate answers must be rigorously examined for emptiness.
Emptiness meaning they aren't the real permanent core of you.
Correct. You interrogate them. If you completely lost your job tomorrow, would you still exist? Yes, so you clearly aren't just your job.
Right.
If you legally changed your name, would you still be the same fundamental conscious entity?
Yes.
So you aren't your name.
So you just purposefully keep stripping away all the external labels.
You ruthlessly keep asking, who am I? Who am I? You slowly peel back the thick onion layers of the protective ego, and the ultimate goal, according to the text, is to continue this relentless questioning until the thinking mind finally lapses into a sulky silence.
A sulky silence. I really love that phrasing. The ego is basically like a teenager saying, fine, whatever, I'm not playing this game anymore.
It literally just runs out of definitions. It
Yeah.
runs completely out of armor to throw at you. And that deeply uncomfortable silence is exactly where the magic finally happens.
The text says, listen for the slightest response and examine it. The true answer arises only when you cease getting any response.
When you finally stop getting a verbal answer, you actually find the real answer.
Because the true core self isn't a word or a job title at all.
No, it's a pure state of being. It's that exact pre-verbal wholeness we talked about way back in stage 1, but now you are bringing it into conscious awareness. It is literally the light finally entering the dark wound.
It's deeply recognizing that all those rigid things we thought we should be the dutiful corporate soldier, the unfeeling tough guy, the wildly successful king, they were all just heavy costumes we were aggressively forced to wear by society.
Exactly. And once you truly realize they are just costumes, you can finally choose to take them off. You realize that your inherent value doesn't come from owning the castle. It comes directly from the conscious light inside of you.
And this naturally connects to something much bigger, doesn't it? The text explicitly links this entire Fisher King state to modern PTSD.
It does, very directly. It says the Fisher King's daily existence, being overly dutiful, totally cut off from emotion, severely depressed, and totally isolated in a living hell, is the very picture of clinical PTSD.
It really seems like we are diagnosing an entire modern society here, not just one medieval king.
We absolutely are. The text offers a scathing critique of modern society that I think is incredibly important to sit with. It points out that we actively financially reward people for existing in this highly traumatized state.
We reward the soldier for being an unfeeling killing machine.
Right. We massively reward the CEO for being a completely ruthless profit generator at the expense of human lives. We actively encourage young boys to develop casual cruelty.
Oh.
But then, what happens next?
Then, the minute they falter,
Exactly. When the internal wound simply becomes way too much to bear, when they inevitably start to bleed all over the nice corporate furniture, society instantly discards them.
we absolutely love the shiny armor, but we completely hate the broken man bleeding inside of it.
We only want the efficient function. We never want the messy feeling. And that is exactly why the Fisher King is so desperately isolated. He intuitively knows that if he openly shows his gruesome wound to the court, the fun party will instantly stop and he will be violently cast out into the cold.
So choosing the path to healing, the path of integration, is actually incredibly risky.
It's utterly terrifying.
Yes.
That's exactly why it requires shuddering. By choosing to heal, you are actively risking your high social status. You are risking your VIP membership in the Club of the Invulnerable. But the only other alternative is to remain stuck on that cold throne, silently bleeding out forever.
The text really emphasizes a hopeful point here, though. It says the Fisher King's wound is not a permanent life sentence. It is actually a call to integration.
That's the vital psychological reframing. The deep wound isn't a cosmic punishment for doing something wrong. It's actually a desperate invitation. It's your own neglected psyche screaming at you, hey, something massive is missing here. Come back into the dark and find it.
And the true healing doesn't come from aggressively rejecting the wound anymore.
No, absolutely not. You can't just slap a positive vibes bandage on it or numb it out with more wine. True healing only comes from deeply understanding it, actively reclaiming the lost, brutalized self.
It comes from finally accepting that the weakness you tried so hard to kill, your deep sensitivity, your capacity for love, your desperate need for human connection, that softness is actually your greatest strength.
There is a really beautiful quote referenced toward the end of the source material from Robert A. Johnson, who wrote the book He, Understanding Masculine Psychology. And this quote it honestly landed perfectly for me.
What's the quote?
He wrote, "Every man has a wound, and the wound is always in the exact same place where love should be."
Where love should be. Wow.
That is the absolute crux of the entire deep dive. The agonizing wound is simply the vast absence of love. And not just romantic love from a partner, but fundamental self-love.
The unconditional, easy love that we completely lost when we were forced to leave the puddle stage.
Exactly. The foundational love that simply says, you are completely enough just exactly as you are right now. You do not need to build the giant castle to be worthy of existing.
And instead of believing that, we frantically try to fill that gaping hole with constant achievement, with thicker armor, with the shiny grail of worldly success, falsely thinking it would magically heal us. But it didn't.
Because the false grail of success only serves the hungry ego. The true healing grail of loving kindness serves the actual soul.
So if you're listening to this deep dive right now, and you're feeling that exact ache in your chest, that specific hollow Fisher King ache, the text highly suggests checking out Robert Bly's book Iron John, or that Robert Johnson book He. These are basically detailed survival manuals for this highly specific journey.
They are absolutely essential readings for anyone who is actively trying to navigate the painful transition from the brutalized adolescent into a genuinely mature, fully integrated human being.
So let's take a breath and recap exactly where we've been today. We started out with the brutalized adolescent, standing rigidly between those broken mirrors, slowly learning to violently reject their own soft vulnerability just to survive the cafeteria.
And we watched with horror as that protected adolescent grew up into the wounded king, massively successful on the outside, but in absolute agony on the inside, and deeply irrationally resentful of anyone who dares to remain innocent.
We watched young Percival fail the test the very first time because he was way too distracted by the glamorous party and way too worried about being perceived as polite to just ask the real, messy question.
But then we found the actual cure, learning to shudder, bravely facing the sheer horror of our own lifelong dissociation, and sitting quietly in the uncomfortable silence to relentlessly ask, who am I? Until all the fake costumes finally fall away.
It's fundamentally a journey from the rigid head back down into the open heart, from the agonizing groin wound right back to the violent source of life.
It really is, and honestly, it's the only journey that actually matters in the end.
You know, it's funny, the old myth actually leaves things hanging on purpose. Percival completely fails the very first time. The text explicitly says he succeeds the second time, but it's a total mystery how. It doesn't give us the step-by-step, play-by-play.
But that's entirely because the second time is completely different for every single person. Your specific second chance won't look anything like mine.
Right.
It might honestly be quitting a highly paid, toxic job. It might be finally starting deep trauma therapy. It might literally be just sitting in your car and crying deeply for the very first time in 10 years.
So, here is the final provocative challenge for you, the listener. Are you currently sitting at the loud party?
Are you just drinking from the easy cup of distraction?
Mindlessly scrolling through your phone, working late on a Tuesday for no real reason, buying expensive things you definitely don't need, completely ignoring the bleeding, wounded king sitting right next to you, or, more likely, bleeding out deep inside of you.
The music is incredibly loud. The vintage wine is flowing. It is so terribly easy to just forget.
But what actually happens if you intentionally stop the party? What happens if you finally put down the drink, look directly at the terrifying wound, and finally ask the one question that matters? Whom does this serve?
Does this heavy armor serve my fragile image? Or does it finally serve my soul?
That's the ultimate question, and frankly, only you can answer it. Thank you so much for taking this really intense deep dive with us today.
It's been an absolute pleasure to unpack this with you.
We'll see you next time.